Well, Nigeria so far in the past 20 years or thereabouts has definitely has at least, or had rather, 20 budgets, that's appropriation bills presented at the National Assembly. But the big question is how accountable have those budgets been? For this year, or at least for the coming year, budget 2021, we're looking at a budget of economic recovery and resilience. But there's so much more behind all of this. So let's speak with the man who knows so well about the budgeting process and what we have before us as a nation, talking about the 2021 budget. And also take a look at the 2020 budget. We have joining us this morning the DG of the Budget Office of the Federation, Ben Akabueze. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, first with the budget defense process at the National Assembly. We just saw you in one of those reports, and I know this is something we see every other year. We have MDAs visiting the National Assembly just to defend their budget. So let's start off from there. From the process you have seen so far, yes, it's not over, but we've had a series of MDAs defend their budget. What is your assessment? Has there been any sort of improvement from what we have seen in previous years, especially because there have been some drama, some controversies? But what's your assessment?
I think it's going reasonably well. There's commitment on both sides to get this done. And when issues arise, for those issues to be addressed, to be, sorted out, promptly. And so we believe that we are on course to have the budget passed before the end of the year.
Yes, I mean, we saw that with the previous budget. But regarding this process itself, for a lot of people, they wonder, what is the essence of it? I mean, these MDAs have presented their budgets to your office. You have collated them. Why is there a need to go through the budget defense process? How much of this is a game changer, really, in the budgeting process?
Well, I mean, to be frank with you, this is not necessarily how it's done in every country, but the parliament, in its own wisdom, has chosen to deal with this, this way, to engage every single, MDA. I mean, if you look at the United States of America, from which we largely borrow this system of presidential democracy and all the other associated systems. You don't necessarily have every agency showing up at the Congress in DC.
Well, from what you have seen over the past few years, how productive would you say this particular process has been in our budget implementation, budget accountability and all?
Well, I think for one, many MDAs, feel under pressure that, they'll have to account to Parliament for the performance, of their previous budget and to justify the budget for the ensuing year. So to some extent, it does, it does add value in terms of accountability, which is which appears to be your focus. So, yeah. Well, and then, of course, this is often done with media and the public in attendance, and so that again, puts MDAs under some pressure that they need to be accountable, and typically nobody wants to go and make a fool of themselves or be made a fool of at those sessions.
Well, at that session, one of those sessions where you attended, you made a statement that you were concerned about some MDAs not being able to possibly pay November's salaries. Well, you gave the context and you gave a resolution, but people heard that, and maybe because they are probably employees or they know people that are employed in some of those MDAs, they got worried. So if you could just run us through that. I mean, what exactly brought us to that point? You explained how we're going to get out of it. But the question is, what happens after November? Because there's December and there's lots of months and years ahead.
Well, I'm glad, that you heard, because I was shocked at the reportage of that, especially in the print media yesterday. In fact, one had a blazing headline, "We are broke." I never said anything like that. Basically, what it is at the time that we were preparing the 2020 budget, the negotiations for the minimum wage were ongoing. They hadn't been finalized. And so the 2020 budget, personnel budget for MDAs, was based on the old salary structure. But what we did was we then made a lump sum provision in the service-wide vote to be able to deal with this situation, which we anticipated would occur towards the end of the year. And what I stated when I appeared before one of the committees, and a member raised the issue that one of the agencies that appeared before them said they were not going to be able to pay their employees. I said that it wasn't something to worry about. It was not peculiar to that agency. And I stated that it was something we had control of, and that we had identified about 428 agencies that would be in that situation. It was anticipated, and that we're working to make sure that, from the service-wide provision we had made, that those agencies receive what the funds that they need to be able to pay their staff for November and December. And so everyone is going to be paid for November and December. There's no cause for worry.
So the question is, what happens afterwards? I mean, has that issue been resolved? Because we're looking at a situation where the country says we can't afford some of these things. Our revenue is dwindling, especially because of the price of crude. We have to borrow to make up for the gap. In fact, you find this prevalent even across other states. But regarding the federal government and the MDAs, what happens afterwards? How sustainable is this?
Well, I'm not sure what I mean by afterwards. Let me say that for 2021, the personnel cost budget is based on the new salary structure. So we're not likely to have a repeat of this situation. If you're asking about how sustainable the high personnel cost is, you're right. That's something to worry about. In the 13 trillion naira budget for 2021, about 3.7 trillion is personnel cost. And so that's more than a third of the budget. And when you relate that to projected revenues, that's about 50% of revenues, on the assumption that the revenues perform at 100%. If, to the extent that revenues don't perform at 100%, then it becomes even a higher percentage of the revenues. And so when you begin to spend over 50% of your revenues on personnel costs, and you need to provide for the funding for developmental projects, it's a cause for worry, and in the long term is not sustainable. But the solution is not to cut public sector wages. As you know, public sector wages are relatively low compared to the private sector. The solution remains to grow our revenues. And that's the message that is being sent across the entire service. Everyone, all hands have to be on deck to show up, revenues, and to, basically plug any leakages that may exist. And
now, regarding,
we deal with the revenue problem, a lot of the issues that are worrying when with respect to government's fiscal situation will basically be taken care of, whether it's the high personnel cost relative to total revenues, whether it's the debt service to revenue ratio, or even the inadequate level of funding available to meet our huge infrastructure deficit. All of these will be taken care of as we grow revenues.
If I can just take you up on that revenue aspect, because, a lot of Nigerians are wondering, how will this budget affect me? That's usually the question, what's in it for me? Now, you've talked about revenues, and I just want to know, how is this budget going to find that delicate balance between ensuring that we perform better in terms of generating revenue, But then don't also forget, this has been a challenging year for people. COVID-19 struck and economic losses followed. So how do you strike that balance between generating as much revenue and also ensuring that that budget supports people that have lost their means of livelihood? How is that delicate balance being handled?
Well, incidentally, to be able to support people as much as we ought to, we need first to find the revenues. When you look at the current structure of our revenues, unlike in most countries around the world, where taxation represents the principal source of funding for government, we're still heavily dependent on revenues from natural resources. And so when we talk about revenue, we're talking about optimizing the revenues from these resources, whether they be oil, whether they be solid minerals, or other natural endowments. But there's no escaping the fact that people and businesses that generate profits have got to pay their taxes. Remember, taxation is on profit. So if any business that isn't generating profits in the present circumstances isn't going to be forced to pay taxes, on non-existent, revenues. So that's, that's the reality.
Well,
So, I don't think that people need to worry about, the impact of government's drive for revenues in, if things are not exactly working out for them at the moment. It's also, noteworthy that in this budget, government has stepped up provisions for, to provide assistance for people. For instance, there is a provision for, the youth, a youth investment fund, which has been made in this budget, despite the challenging revenue situation. The social investment program has been, sustained, and even across other, agencies like the Ministry of Women Affairs, there are, programs, to support, women. And
well, Mr. Kabuzi, you talked about leakages the other time, and of course, that's been an ongoing conversation over the years. But then I know that one of the ways in which these leakages come to the fore is through the Auditor General's report year after year. And we know that since 2013, several reports have been released by the Office of the Auditor General. But what is of concern is the one that's in the public space, in recent time. On the front page of the dailies, for instance, this morning, we have one that says about 801 federal agencies and 110 foreign missions have not been audited since 2017. And in the same Auditor General's report of this year, there is a report that says 11 of them have never been audited, down from 69 in the 2016 report. So one do not have audited reports. Is there a justification for them to have budgetary allocation when they have not retired what they spent the previous year?
well, first of all, let's understand that when it comes to audit, we have internal audit, okay? There's an internal audit function, which is provided by the Office of the Accountant General, and you have internal auditors embedded in all the agencies. And then you have what is called the federal auditors, with staff of the Auditor General of the Federation, also embedded in agencies. And so on a daily basis, there's auditing going on. Nevertheless, that's not a reason for the full year external audits not to be done on a timely basis. But you see, the decision to get audits done on a timely basis is not one that everybody in the establishment has responsibility for. And so what we need to do is not, the solution is not to deny those agencies, budgets, because those agencies exist and they have functions to perform. They have public goods and services to deliver. So when you deny them budgets, it's not so much them. I mean, the one that comes to them is their personnel cost, budget. The rest of it is to be able to deliver public goods and services. What needs to happen is that the chief executives of those agencies and the boards or whoever is responsible for the failure to get the audits done on a timely basis, those are the people who need to be sanctioned. The solution is not to deny them budgets.
Well, while that is a given, Mr. Kabweze, one then wonders, how do we, get back all those monies? Because you have once said on this program that one way to get ourselves out of a financial mess is to spend our way out of it. There are more than 2 trillion naira locked in all of these agencies, well, a good number of these agencies that have not been fully remitted or not duly accounted for, many of them violating the financial regulations, many of them violating certain provisions of the Constitution in the spendings, and yet they continue to get these allocations. More than 2 trillion, according to the analysis from the Auditor General's report of 2017. How do we begin to, address this? Because if we do not find a way to block those leakages, just as you have mentioned, 2 trillion naira is already, quote unquote, floating around somewhere. So what do we need to do?
Well, I mean, it's a tough job, but we just need to keep pressing. You observed earlier on that from 69 agencies that had ever been audited, the number is down to 11. Hopefully by this time next year we'll be saying it's down to 0. And what has happened is that government is basically increasing the firepower in terms of oversight. The ICPC, for instance, is playing an increasingly greater role in tracking down these leakages. So it's not just left through the office of the Auditor General. In the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning headquarters, we have the Presidential Initiative on Continuous Audit that is also going out and helping out. We're also from the Budget Office constituting teams that go out and track. There's currently a joint team of the Budget Office, the Office of the Accountant General, PICA, that and the Office of the Head of the Service that is out there trying to track down any malpractices with respect to personnel costs. So it's an ongoing battle.
So what do you rely on?
We're making progress.
Right. You mean you rely on the internal audit for your budget monitoring and evaluation, because as it stands right now, we don't exactly have the federal audit that you mentioned. So is that what you rely on?
No. Remember I said there are federal auditors embedded in all the agencies. And those federal auditors review transactions as they occur. Okay, so, which is different from then, doing a holistic audit of, of the financial statements of those agencies. But there are staff of the Auditor General embedded in every agency, apart from the internal auditors from the Office of the Accountant General. And on a daily basis, as transactions occur, they're being audited. Remember, the government system is automated also. And so there are audit trails, designed into the system. There are systems of internal controls that are built into the system. And basically what the audit does at the end of it is to certify that those controls have worked as they're designed to work, and that people haven't basically been able to breach them. And because at the end of the day, every internal control system, no matter how good it is, can be breached where there is collusion.
Basically, regardless of the fact that there hasn't been audit conducted in some of these MDAs since 2017, you're saying that you still have something you rely on in terms of budget monitoring and the rest.
Oh, yes. And I mean, we also have a budget monitoring and evaluation department. So we go, but then we can only do a sample of projects. There are thousands and thousands of projects in every year's budget. And so it's only on a sampling basis that the monitoring and evaluation occurs. But when an agency becomes notorious for, some difficulties, or let me just say, irregularities in their project execution, then you can zero in with that agency and do a broader, evaluation.
Well, the House of Reps, during an investigative hearing, had this to say about your office. And it says, even in fund allocation for the budget, the Director General of the Budget Office has intentionally, deliberately underfunded the Office of the Auditor General so that he won't be able to discharge its duties and uncover all the illegal criminal activities and looting going on in the country. Now, that's direct. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think that's a patently unfair statement. In any case, what we send to the National Assembly is a budget proposal, and year in, year out, the National Assembly intervenes to alter the provisions made for different MDAs. So if anybody had felt that way, it was within their right to alter whatever provision that has been made, and they haven't done so in the past. So to make a statement like that is, I think, pure grandstanding and playing to the gallery.
But the other part of that statement is saying that, the Auditor General is not able to uncover all the illegal criminal activities and looting going on in the country. That statement is a statement of, shortly saying, well, definitely this is ongoing in the country. So how do we begin to uncover all that if the Auditor General, for example, is not getting enough funding? Well, you say you do sampling, but
if you
how do we
make
begin
a
to uncover
categorical statement like that, then that means you've established that you know where the looting and all of that is going on, and you don't need the Auditor General to be able to move. Even the National Assembly can move against such agencies. I'm not here defending that they may not be, okay? And that's why I used the word earlier on that, we're constantly on the lookout for any leakages and to try to plug them. But I'm just saying, to be categorical as, the statement that you read, then, means that somebody already knows that something is happening somewhere. And if that is known, it does not require the audited report to be able to move against such an agency or whoever is responsible.
Looking at the amount budgeted for the Auditor General's office for 2021 proposal, 4.4 billion for recurrent, 251 million for capital. Is that enough, face value? How do we even judge if that's enough? Because the House of Reps feels this is not enough for the Office of the Auditor General to carry out its functions.
Well, let's first of all, I'll be the first to admit here that there's not a single agency that will tell you that their budget is enough. Because overall, the total budget is a fraction of the size of the budget that we should be operating. But we're limited, we're constrained by, revenues, by inadequate resources. So the claim that it's not adequate, I'm not going to contest. And I can tell you there's not a single agency that will tell you that they have an adequate budget. All that I can say, however, is if you go and check it, look at the trajectory over the last 4 years, every single year we have increased, we've made some increase in the budget for the Office of the Auditor General, even in periods where across board agencies have seen lower budgets. Over the last 4 years, year after year, we have seen an increase in the budget for the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation.
All right, we'll go to break now. A couple of other issues to raise moving forward, and we'll take a look at the 2020 budget also, how well we performed, because we can judge from what we have done, what we will do. Please stay with us. our concluding moment with the DGBOF, Ben Akabweze, on the program this morning. Aya.
Mr. Kabuse, I just wanted to point you to just one of several infractions of the laws that guide our financing. The Auditor General's report of 2017 indicates that there were unauthorized deductions from the Federation account by revenue collecting agencies in the year 2017 to the tune of 1.5 trillion naira. Now, this has happened. We don't know how many trillions or millions of naira were involved in the previous years. We don't have the 2018 report, we don't have the 2019 report, and most certainly we don't have that of 2020. You talked about the leakages. The leakages will help us to ensure that at least we have some more liquid cash flowing around for our functions and so many other things that you see in these slides. We need to find a way to begin to readdress these things. Otherwise, they will continue. What do we have to do?
Well, one of the things we have to do is we must make these audits more timely. I mean, this is 2020. We are near the end of 2020. We're talking about the outcome of a 2017 audit. That makes it even more difficult to recover, some of that money if indeed, that number is correct. But, so hopefully we can get to a situation where the audits are done more timely and therefore any recovery actions can, be more effective. But more importantly also, those reports point out to specific systemic weaknesses that enable and such leakages and therefore we must then act to tighten those controls around such weaknesses and make sure that those things do not recur. But we must also, there must be consequences when people have been found to basically been engaged in such infractions. Hopefully, and that's why in every year's budget now we have a provision for recoveries. In the 2021 budget, we've got a provision for, I believe the number is about 238 billion naira of recoveries that we project to make, because this is an ongoing, as I said, it's an ongoing exercise. So as this happens, we are also, as we establish, with certainty how much remittance any agency hasn't made, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation is now empowered to go into their account and pull back such funds if they're still there.
So, on a final note, what's the plan for transitioning from
in the budget for?
Please go ahead. You can
go on.
Please.
I was going to say that apart from the general, projection for recoveries of 238 billion, in the budget for the government-owned enterprises for 2021, we've also made a provision for about 300 billion naira of recoveries of remittances due from previous periods that they may not have made.
Right. So on a final note, what's the plan for transitioning from the 2020 budget to the 2021 budget when it's eventually passed into law? Because I understand we're still in the 2020 budget, but because of the new cycle now, things have changed quite a bit. So what's the plan for transitioning smoothly such that there are no issues with disbursements and performance?
Well, basically all agencies are working very hard now to be able to, accomplish their programs and projects for the 2020 year, knowing that the way the system is designed, come 31st December, 2020, the budget for 2020 will lapse and all unutilized funds will return to the Treasury and it will no longer be able to implement the 2020 budget beyond that date. because you cannot implement two budgets simultaneously. If the
Nigerians-
budget for 2021 gets passed
Right. So what should
before the end of the
Nigerians...
year, as we project, then that budget will be ready to go from the 1st of January. So you can't run two budgets simultaneously.
Okay, so this will be our parting shots. What should Nigerians be expecting from this coming budget?
Well, Nigerians should expect, greater attention to, social welfare. Truth is, in difficult times, COVID-19 threw us back into recession, and so, people are hurting. And so in the 2021 budget, there's a lot more provision made to give the more vulnerable, a helping hand. In the 2021 budget, there's been no provision for any increases in tax rates. Okay, and all that we're focusing on is, improving efficiency of collection. For the 2021 budget, aggregate capital spending has also improved. In 2020, aggregate capital budget was 26% of expenditures. In 2021, it's 29%. And so we should expect to see more investment in, infrastructure.
Right.
As going to 2021,
we'll keep
government
our
is
eyes
also
then.
adopting a lot more creative options for, delivering public infrastructure. So,
Well, we'll keep our eyes on
that's
that
something
budget, definitely.
of, concern to the public.
But we'd like to thank you so much, DG Budget Office of the Federation, Ben Akabweze, for shedding some insight into the 2021 budget.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Well, let's take a look at some legal perspectives to this, especially because we've had MDAs that have not remitted funds, have not accounted for these funds, and we're being joined by legal practitioner Ebonlu Adegboruwa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Well, I believe you've been following the conversation, and seeing that we have, hundreds of MDAs not remitting funds. Even the auditing has not been conducted since 2017, so we're not exactly sure what we have right now. What does the law say in terms of maybe punishment or ramifications for such acts?
Well, thank you. The Constitution is clear in Section 85 that there shall be an Auditor General for the Federation, and he is to be appointed under the Constitution, and his responsibilities are very clear. That Auditor General is to audit and report on all the accounts of all offices and courts of the Federation, and after that audit and report, he will then submit his report to the National Assembly. And also in that regard, therefore, he is to have access to all the books, records, returns, and all other documents relating to the accounts of the Federation. And that is in respect of offices and then also of the courts. Under the same law, the Auditor General is empowered to provide auditors for all MDAs, for all commissions, statutory corporations, government agencies, and all bodies and powers that derive their funds from the Consolidated Revenue Fund and also under appropriation. And when he does that, they will then also give him access to all their books. And the Constitution is very clear, and this is what I ought Nigerians to note, that in the exercise of his functions under the Constitution, the Auditor General is not subject to the direction or control of any person or authority. He has autonomy, he has independence. So if the National Assembly is making a case that the office of the Auditor General is not being funded in order to perform its constitutional responsibilities, that is a very serious infraction on the part of the executive that should warrant sufficient sanction for all the offices that are involved in such constitutional violation. Because you know that once money is appropriated by the National Assembly, they then have the responsibility to ensure that money so appropriated is expended for the particular purpose of appropriation. And this is where the Auditor General comes in. He is to trace the funds.
Just a moment on that.
The books
Yes,
of
just a moment on that, Mr. Adegborua. Just a moment on that. That which you are saying now is a major issue because, you know, if you look at all of the analysis, well, some analysis that have come out as a result of the Auditor General's report of 2017, you'll find out that there have been copious and flagrant disregard of financial regulations of 2009, along with the Constitution that you talked about, and then the Public Procurement Act and so many others like that. Mr. Ben Akabo, while talking, said, what we need to do is to ensure that there are consequences. Who is to enforce these consequences? Because in that same report of the Auditor General of 2017, we find out that one of the biggest violators is the Federal Ministry of Justice. So, what do we then need to do?
It's very clear. It's for the National Assembly to exercise their powers under Section 88 and also various other sections of the Constitution that allows the power of expenditure and appropriation. If you approve money by virtue of appropriation for a particular MDA, ministry, parastatal or agency, and there is allegation of lack of compliance with financial regulations or such other enactment or law, it is for the National Assembly to wield its power to ensure that until there is compliance, subsequent budgets or estimates of that same organization that's in violation is not approved. Because you cannot come to equity unless you come with clean hands. If the National Assembly approved money for 2019 and such money is not being accounted for, is not being audited, what is the basis of approving further expenditure for the same agency or ministry that's in default? So the whole blame goes to the National Assembly for not exercising its willpower. I mean, look at the NDDC, for instance. With all the challenges, with all the mind-boggling revelations that we got, where people were fainting on the floor of the National Assembly, that same National Assembly has approved another budget subsequent to those scandalous revelations for that same NDDC that does not have a board, according to the NDDC Act, for that same NDDC that's being run by only 3 individuals. So look, Nigerians are just being deceived by the legislature and the executive. There is a collusion going on between the National Assembly and these executive bodies for the purpose of looting and then taking away money from the treasury. So what the National Assembly does normally is to come and be crying wolf and give the impression that they are doing some kind of oversight function, whereas within the specific discharge of their responsibilities, they go ahead to pamper these agencies because they benefit from it indirectly from all that we have had in Nigeria. So the blame is at the feet of the National Assembly, which is only crying in public, but is in private, colluding with its agencies and approving humongous amounts of money for them when they are in violation of previous appropriation which they have not accounted for.
You don't buy some of the statements we see from the executive and the legislature. But I would like to thank you so much. This is an ongoing conversation. I will keep our eyes on that budget defense process and eventual passing of the budget to ensure, that things are done as they ought to be done. Mr. Ebolo Adegborua, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's the subject of our next conversation. But right now we have the Deputy Director, Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, Kolawole Oluwadare, joining us in our Lagos studio. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning. Thank you.
And we also have in our Abuja studio, John Mutu, a Public Affairs Analyst and Legislative Consultant. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let me begin with you.
Good morning.
Mr. Yes, sir. Let me begin with you, Mr. Oluwadare. Well, first of all, a quick one at the previous conversation. Your organization released an analysis of the 2017 report of the Auditor General. That's not the first, definitely, and that will not be the last. What are some of your findings and what are your concerns?
Our findings, as detailed in that analysis, is that we have a growing number over the years, at least since we started democracy in 1999, of MDAs who have not complied with statutory requirements of audit requirements, and that is shown consistently with those reports. But what we've not seen is any kind of punitive action against those MDAs, which is why we've done advocacy over this consistently. So that analysis is just a step further in our analysis. And our concern is that things cannot continue to go this way. Right from the budgeting process, where we have some amount of transparency now, even though it's not enough, we need to dovetail that into the expenditure side of things and what in financial terms we call retirement, to make sure that these MDAs, we can ably account for these funds, particularly within these economic challenges we have in Nigeria and the paucity of funds and the lack of inability of government to pay minimum wage. So it's just natural that funds, critical funds needed for important things, should be saved.
But then another concern that comes with that is, on the one hand, we are saying we do not have enough. On the other hand, we continue to borrow. And if you look at the size of budget assigned for debt servicing, it is quite significant. And if in the 2017 analysis that you did, we have a shortfall, so to speak, of more than 2 trillion, does that mean that is gone already? Because, of course, you heard Mr. Ben Akabueze say, because it wasn't timeous. The Auditor General's report didn't come in on time, so it'll be difficult, if not impossible, to get back all of that funds.
No, I don't think so, and I wouldn't buy that argument. Looking at the provisions of Section 88 of the Constitution, the oversight powers of the National Assembly can still be brought to bear, and that is to make sure that those defaulting MDAs can be made to account for those funds by way of not allocating funds meant to them until they are able to effectively explain what has happened from what the Auditor General had said. And that could be done easily at any time, I presume.
Well, I know that Mr. Mutu has always been working with the National Assembly concerning the Auditor General's report. Looking at all that you have heard, I'm sure you have listened all along. What's your take as well, especially concerning all of these issues about the Auditor General's report and then our budget processing and defense and all of that?
Okay. Thank you, Ayo, for a very important question. But like I always say, I want to raise the bar a little beyond just the issues that have been discussed around the audit report. For me, the narrative should go beyond just compliance audit that the Auditor General currently undertakes. And in my discussion with the immediate past Auditor General and the Public Accounts Committee in the National Assembly, has always been around moving from compliance audit to start looking at performance audits. Year in, year out, we come present the report that this agency did not remedy, this agency did not retire this amount of money and all that. But there are bigger issues. The 2020 budget was around 13 trillion. The question I should be asking, or the question the Auditor General should be asking at the end of the day, what is the outcome of the spend in 2020? What was the outcome of the spend in 2019? What was the outcome of the spend in 2018? If an agency comes and says they want to spend 100 billion, at the end of the year, the Auditor General should be able to say what has become the outcome of that investment. How much did that budget buy for Nigerians? How did that reduce poverty in the country? I heard Ben Akabueze this morning spoke eloquently about the budget, but the question is, in all these years, to what extent has the budget reduced poverty? To what extent has the budget increased jobs for the youth? To what extent has it put the food on the table of the masses? The Auditor General should also be asking, in education, what has been the impact of the spend in education? What has been the impact on school enrollment? What has been the impact on performance of students in exit exams like WAEC and all that? And
well, Mr. Mutu, you also recall that
in reducing
just one moment. Just one moment. You also heard
those are the issues
Mr. Yes, just a moment. You also heard the senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Ebonlo Adegborougha, say that the buck stops for this accountability thing at the feet of the National Assembly. That is the senators, the members of the House of Representatives who receive the report. It is their responsibility to ensure compliance, to ensure that something is done about it, because that is what they are supposed to do. The report of the Auditor General is not just supposed to be on a shelf. It is an instrument for the National Assembly to work with. From your own conversations with the members of the National Assembly, what has become of that?
I agree with you completely. Like I said, it's a relay. It starts from the Accountant General, who sends the accounts to the Auditor General. And the Auditor General picks the baton from there, does his analysis, engages with the relevant people who are supposed to give a report to his office, and at the end of the day, he prepares an annual report which he sends to the National Assembly. The Public Accounts Committee, on the other hand, is supposed to now further analyze those and engage with those who have been accused of not complying with the extant provisions of the law. And if anybody is found wanting, they are supposed to prepare a report and submit on the floor of both houses. And in plenary, they will discuss those recommendations and make appropriate, make a resolution and send to the appropriate quarters for enforcement. Once there is a break along this channel, the whole essence of the audit becomes defeated. So if the Auditor General has submitted his report to the National Assembly, the question is to what extent has the National Assembly or the Public Accounts Committee be able to do justice to that? We know that the current audit report that is before them is already behind schedule. We're talking about 2017 audit when we're already talking about 2020. So with the 2016-2017 audit report that was submitted and all the hearings that they have done, have they presented a report to plenary for the National Assembly to make a resolution upon? And if they have done that, to what extent has the executive complied with those? So to the best of my knowledge, I think the National Assembly to a large extent has been in arrears. I remember the last time they are still considering the 2012 audit report. They have not even gotten to 2015 audit report, talk less of 2017. So I think the problem is a huge one. The National Assembly also has its own faults. The Office of the General is also in arrears. The executive also in issues of compliance.
All right, Mr. Butu.
So completely, the whole of that value chain will have a lot of gaps in that.
It's a long conversation, but just as we said, it's just to broach the conversation. Really, that's not really why we brought you here this morning. But when we return from this break, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the issue at hand. Please stay with us. Well, thanks for staying with us. Let's begin the conversation this way, Mr. Oluwadare. You authored that letter to the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation in response to him about when he asked for the list of governors that have or officers, public officers that have collected, double payment. But you highlighted in that letter that urging the Office of the Auditor General, the Attorney General of the Federation, to see to it that those pension laws in those states, you wanted something done with them, repeal them, whatever it is. We know Imo State has just repealed that law. Lagos State government is trying to do that now. What necessitated that in the first place? And then maybe you want to backtrack to that judgment of Justice Okotoyinbo.
Yeah, I think that letter is actually the third in the series of sequence of events. So what we did started in 2017. So we wrote to the Attorney General of the Federation asking him to take steps to challenge the legality of those state pension laws, particularly some ex-governors who are now senators and in double pay, as it were. And so he didn't respond to that letter. So we approached the court, which is what led to the filing of the suit at the Federal Court, Lagos. And we got judgment last year. That's Honorable Justice Okotoyinbo of Federal Court, Lagos, and gave judgment mandating the Attorney General to take steps as a public officer under Section 174 of the Constitution to challenge the legality of those state pension laws and to get to recover those funds if they were found to be unlawfully paid. And so the second letter we sent was a letter containing the judgment, naturally, to the Attorney General for enforcement. So what we got in response was a letter from the Attorney General a while back, early this year, in February. It was delivered in March, asking SERAP to compile a list of those ex-governors who might be drawing pay as senators and those who are earning pension and forward it to the Office of the Attorney General. You would naturally expect this to be within the purview of the Attorney General. But we responded, and that's what we did. That is the letter you're referring to. So you can see that as a third in the series. Mm-hmm. Sending it to the Attorney General, pointing out the states, to the best of our knowledge, that have those laws, and mentioning some individuals we believe, to the best of our knowledge, are earning such pay. Naturally, in that letter, we also told the Attorney General to take steps, as a public officer, to confirm the veracity of those claims and do what the court had said it should do. So naturally, what we are waiting for now, which will be the enforcement of that judgment, which has not been appealed, by the way, is for the Attorney General to take steps to challenge the legality of those state pension laws in those states and seek for a recovery of such funds.
In the words of Justice Okotoyinbo, delivering that judgment, she was asking that hold or who should approach the court where a particular law is not in the best interest of Nigeria as a country? Who should approach the court where a particular law is detrimental to the interest of a country? Who should institute actions in court for the purpose of recovering public funds collected? Whose role is that?
The Attorney General. And in fact, that's line of reasoning in that judgment, which I think is very profound, is in response to a preliminary objection filed by the Attorney General in that case, challenging SERAP's ability to call local standard to institute the action in the first place. And the judge found that preliminary objection did not have merit, that naturally the Attorney General is empowered by law to do this. He's the chief law officer of the state. And so that is why the judge, in making that finding, dovetailed to compelling him to perform that order. What we had filed is called, we are asking for a prayer of mandamus. That is what we do in law to compel a public officer who has a statutory duty under the law already to fulfill and to perform that his duty.
But let's take this to Mr. Mutu in Abuja. Well, you are not unaware of this as well, and you have had reason to interface with state houses of assembly as well. First of all, what's your own take about all of these, conversations, especially about these state pension laws? How? You asked the question the other time, how do the budgets help to fight or reduce poverty? How do these pension laws help to reduce poverty?
Thank you, Ayo. It only services the needs of the primary beneficiaries who are these former governors. It does not in any way impact on the lives of Nigerians. And I must commend SERAP for taking this initiative. I congratulate them for the victory. And also, let me also congratulate the governor of Zamfara State who took steps to repeal that law in his state. And also the current governor of Lagos State, Governor Sanwo-Olu, for also that bold initiative to commence the process of repealing the law in Lagos State. So I must commend them. It's a noble effort. It's something that is unconscionable. There is no way you can rule the state for 8 years. You fed on the livelihood, on the benevolence of Nigerians. You provided service for 8 years. And within that period of 8 years, you enjoyed all the affordances of office only for you to leave, and you now want to enjoy pensions for life just because you served. You volunteered to serve, and during that your service, you've been adequately taken care of. It is wrong for you now, after service, to now enact laws by the House of Assembly to give you life pensions. And in most states, collecting salary, the equivalent of a sitting governor, and when Nigerians are hungry, the people you govern are hungry, there is no evidence to show that you've taken their lives or you have impacted positively on their lives. So it's a wrong thing. I'm happy that the former governor of Lagos State, under whose administration this law was passed, has also thrown his weight behind it. So I'm going to appeal to Nigerians and appeal to other governors whose states also have such laws like Kwara, Akwa Ibom, I think Rivers State, to also take the initiative to repeal those laws immediately.
Well, you also remember, just a quick one, to you,
with the judgment, yeah.
Yes, to you, you also recall that there was a time members of the National Assembly were also pushing for the same law to get some pension, for themselves as legislators as soon as they leave office. So it's a thought that happened also in the legislature, and even in, I think, some houses of assembly as well also attempted that. In the first place, was there ever any law or anything in our books that point in that direction at all that could have necessitated that thinking?
I think maybe since the governors, the executive branch is benefiting from it, so they maybe also wanted to extend it if those states that push for that to also see if they can also, I think that was basically for the leadership, for the Senate President and the Speaker. I don't think it was for all the members to benefit from that. And if they made that effort, Nigerians resisted it and that was thrown out.
Mr. Oluwadare, let's just try to get this clear now. So is it for drawing dual emolument or generally for ex-governors and their deputies who have served to not receive pensions and those benefits? Is it just for the ones that are maybe ministers or in the National Assembly, or generally any governor or deputy governor?
It's for both. Yes, and that is why the Attorney General should take steps to challenge the legality of those laws as a chief law officer. And then when the court finds that, then he needs to take steps to recover those funds.
So this is an issue of morality majorly, because people point to the CCB Act and say, well, it doesn't exactly deny former governors from drawing dual emoluments, for example.
To speak to what Ayo said earlier, for governors and deputy governors, we have some sort, I would call it some sort of constitutional basis for that, and that's Section 124, sub 5 of the Constitution, which allows the state house assemblies to legislate on pensions for governors and deputy governors. That is on one side. But when you look at the overall theme of the Constitution and what a governor is meant to do as his office created by 176 of the Constitution, is that conscionable? Could those funds could have been better applied to other things? And what about the percentages and the number of funds allocated? So if the law gives you power to make a law for pension, why must it run into billions of naira annually and millions of naira for states that could even afford to pay minimum wage for its workers? Thinking that a governor or a deputy governor serves a maximum of 8 years, and people slave all their lives for 25 to 30 years, and you can't afford to pay them. And so it's not really a matter, I wouldn't call it a matter of morality, it's still a matter of law. To think that a governor and a deputy governor took an oath of allegiance under chapter, that's the 7th schedule of the Constitution, to act in the best interest of Nigeria and the people, which the oath of office, we should remember, is of such importance that the same Constitution says that he cannot perform any function of his office unless he takes that oath. So it's not a matter of morality, it's a matter of that same law, which prevails. The oath of office, other constitutional obligations, or Section 124 that appears to allow them to make those
Or
laws.
the state laws also that actually empower the states to pay these emoluments and benefits.
And yes, but the state houses of assembly, in making those laws, should look at the position of their states, what they could afford, what is the idea. For instance, looking at the literacy report for quarter 1 for 2020, a state like Osun State had more than, I think, 91% of the FAC allocation went to debt repayment. So does that kind of state have any business paying pension to former governors? And so just because the Constitution gives the state House of Assembly powers to do that, doesn't mean the pension has to be huge, and does not mean there has to be a pension law in the first place.
So you are for there shouldn't be any pension
At all.
whatsoever?
At all.
I mean, we have this analysis that we've done for, across states, and you see this one is under the Lagos law of 2007 for former governors, former deputy governors. The benefit is life pension, and it's equivalent to 100% of annual basic salaries of the incumbent governor and deputy. Well, Mr. Mutu, Mr. Oluwadare says this is not just morality, this is also an issue of legality. I'm just thinking, looking at some release from the DMO, you see that those states that still have these laws rank high regarding their debts, both local and foreign debt. So that lends credence to what he's saying. So for you, how do we approach this?
Okay, I think there are two issues here, and Nigerians have already, voiced this out. One is for former governors, the issue of double remuneration. For former governors who retire, who finish their tenure and they are collecting these pensions, and they now move on to now maybe get other political appointments, like former governors that are now ministers. They are enjoying the pensions and they are also still collecting salaries as ministers. How do you balance that? So you are collecting two sets of remuneration from the same government. I think Nigerians rose against it. So if you're already enjoying pensions, you cannot continue to benefit from your current emolument. And if you want to take the current emolument, then you should definitely forfeit the pensions. And we have so many of those former governors who are either in the National Assembly as senators or who are ministers. I think that was the first issue. The second issue is whether is it an issue of law or an issue of morality. First, let me make this clear. The legislature has the power to make laws. And if a House of Assembly, rightly or wrongly, makes such laws that provides for, and they went through the legislative process and provide for pensions for these former governors, that is the existing law. And the only way you can either annul that is to go to court like Serap did, to declare that law null and void. And once that happens, then it becomes an illegality. But until that happens, it borders on issues of morality. If you have served 2 terms, is it right in a state where citizens and pensioners are struggling to get that basic 30,000, 20,000, and the minimum you are not able to pay? On what basis should you, as a former governor, get 30 million naira annually as pension? On what basis should you, as a former governor, be benefiting from pension and continue to also receive money from the federal government or the National Assembly in forms of salaries and allowances when you are enjoying? I think these are the issues. And until that law is declared illegal, it becomes the law of the state. So for me, it's more of an issue of morality. But now that the Federal High Court, based on Serap judgment, has declared that null and void, then it becomes illegal. And whatever the pronouncement of the court, if it says refund those emoluments, then that should be the point. And if it's all for those who have collected double emoluments, they should also refund those allocations because it is completely wrong.
We'll come to that issue of returning or refunding those in a bit. But let me ask you, Mr. Oluwadare, how significant is this amount we are talking about in the budget of each state? What, if you can hazard a guess of what percentage, these emoluments for former governors and deputy governors are, how significant is it?
It varies from state to state. Some run into 500 million every 4 years, some into 1.something billion every year. I think in the last ranking that we did, we had Gombe, Rivers, and Lagos topping the list as to how much goes out, ranging from every year to every 4 years. So it ranges. And I think we should point it out that it's setting a very bad precedent. So we saw AMAC last year, that's Abuja Area Municipal Council, do the same thing, life pensions. And Cherap took that on. We actually wrote to them. And we're in court presently on that matter, telling that's the State High Court of the FCT Abuja to declare that move of AMAC null and void. We're still in court. So you see, if we talk of state, we have 36 states. Multiply that by 774 local governments, following the part of the states. So far we have 23 states. We can leave out Imo State. If Lagos does, that's good. We can leave out Zamfara too. And again, there is so much opacity about these laws, which is why we have another pending suit before the Federal Court presently, where we took steps to write by way of freedom of information request to the governors and the deputy governors. Can we have details of your laws? Because in conducting searches on these laws, we found out that even accessing the laws is a bit of a problem.
Oh, you're saying that some of these laws are not readily available?
Naturally, yes. Laws are compiled in the volume of each state, but to get detailed aspects of what is in what is a bit of a challenge, and that matter is still in court.
So does that mean that there is a deliberate attempt to allow people to breach the law before they are caught and then taken to court and sentenced?
No. The laws have been passed, as it were,
yeah,
by the state assemblies.
Yeah.
But to get access to these laws and to know what is in each of them, which is naturally what you should be able to access from all the public registries, is a bit of a challenge.
Why is that?
So we took that step, and we wrote to all the state governors to say, can we have details of these laws? And it's interesting to know that they are in court defending that suit before the Federal Court of Abuja to provide SERAP with detailed information on what the law is, whether the law exists in their state or not, who has benefited over the years and how much.
So basically, they don't want to release those laws?
Yes, and the details of who has been paid, who has gotten what and how over the years.
All right.
We're still in court on that.
So, I mean, shouldn't the solution be to have these states put up these laws on their websites so that everybody can have access to it?
That will be in keeping with the Freedom of Information Act, which mandates all public agencies of government to not only keep records, but to be proactive in making it easily accessible in whatever format to be usually available to the citizens. But naturally, and the natural defense which they've said in court is that a law is a public document. Anyone can have access to it. But I can tell you, if SERAP has challenge in accessing the copies of these laws, I want to know what the average Nigerian citizen would have gone through. Thinking that the Freedom of Information Act empowers Nigerians, whether educated or not. Not even, the FOI Act says you don't even have to put a request for information in writing. All you have to do is just approach any agency of government and tell them you want information. And that is why it's hard to stay with specifics, except for those that are in the public domain already, which state has what.
Okay, well, there's a list that your body put out of the number of states, all the states. You've said that we should leave out Imo, we should leave out Zamfara, and Lagos is still there until that law is repealed.
We asterisk Lagos.
Pending,
right?
Okay, so in that light, that means there are more than half the number of states in Nigeria that are pretty much susceptible. That's the list right there, of states with pension laws for public office holders, especially governors and deputy governors. And I'm wondering, where do we go from here?
I think the best point of action is the onus is rest on the Attorney General now. There is a judgment of court, and the Attorney General is aware of that judgment. So what the Attorney General needs to do is to obey that judgment, again, that is yet to be appealed against, and to take steps and challenge this in court and seek for a recovery of these funds. He is empowered by law to do that. He has the moral and the legal obligation to do that. So if that is done, that is a blanket. It covers the field, so to speak, all the 36 of the Federation. And this matter is laid to rest once and for all. Instead of this, what we have is piecemeal. by each state.
But don't forget, I think there was this time the Attorney General had this interface with states about releasing money from the source for the judiciary, I believe, and the states were like, well, you don't have the power to dictate to us on that. So don't you think something like this might happen also?
No, you're talking about the judicial autonomy.
Oh, yes.
Judicial autonomy. No, that can't happen. The Attorney General has that overbearing, and that's all you see.
I mean, they already said you don't have that overbearing power
and
regarding
until
this.
that issue is in court, it becomes a legal issue. And I'm sure the judge will make a finding. But it is not something that we could say to prevent the Attorney General from carrying out his statutory duties.
Okay, Mr. Mutu, how feasible is it to recover monies that have already been paid to former governors and former deputy governors, and of course all of the things that may have been given to them over the years? How feasible is that?
Again, unfortunately, I've not had the opportunity. I can't really recollect the specific details of that judgment and the letters of that judgment. Maybe my friend will have. But if the judgment specifically says that such funds should be recovered or should be remitted back to the coffers of the state government, my other concern usually is with the judgments. What was specifically, who was the judgment directed at? Who was supposed to enforce the judgment? Did it say the Attorney General should do this or the Attorney General of the state should do this? Because when you go to court, you have specific prayers. And when the prayers are being granted by the court, who is supposed to enforce? But like he said, the Attorney General of the Federation is the chief law enforcement officer of the Federation. He has a responsibility to enforce compliance to court judgments or laws of the Federation. So yes, if the Attorney General takes that up, it can be recovered. And maybe perhaps SERAP can also go back to court to maybe seek, like he said, an enforcement order to ensure, maybe mandating the Attorney General to take actions to recover those funds. Or maybe the relevant, because if you want to make it piecemeal, like he said, then it means you have to continue to insist on every state Attorney General to enforce that in their various states, which may take a longer time, but the Attorney General of the Federation can take action and maybe look for ways to enforce that judgment.
Well, going back to the issue, beg your pardon, Kadi, going back to the issue of what responsibilities the states, have in all of this, there is also that prayer, as contained in the letter to the Attorney General's office, that the Attorney General should find ways to enforce the fact that these laws, the state pension laws of the governors and deputy governors should be repealed, or at least worked in a way that it doesn't milk the purses. How feasible is that, especially with the houses of assembly in each state, seeing how powerful the governors were while they were in office?
Yeah, I think especially for a government whose mantra is the fight against corruption, for a government who appeals to the masses, for a government also who want to reduce the cost of governance, I think this arms the current federal government with the need, especially the Attorney General of the Federation, with the needed ammunition to take this initiative, because the court has already given that judgment. Citizens have also cried against that, and it is expected that the Attorney General, as a law enforcement officer, should take that initiative, either to institute it in the court of law, or maybe start engaging with his colleagues at the state level to ensure that such obnoxious laws are repealed, because it appeals to the interest of citizens. It is
my question. One moment, Mr. Muktu. My question here is, how feasible is that going to be with the state houses of assembly repealing a law that will please or displease the governor, to whom many people believe that the houses of assembly are appendages?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. At the state level, in each state, for the House of Assembly to take their own initiative, it's going to be a tall order. But if the government take it as a mission, either through the party or because once there is consensus that this law, it does not serve the interest of the people, and the Attorney General working with the President take that initiative to look at various caucuses, either through the party caucus or through the Forum of Attorney Generals, or through calling a dialogue to make sure that there is a collective agreement, that will be easier for them. But if you say a House of Assembly should just wake up and take that initiative, it's going to be very, very difficult, except they enjoy the blessings of the governor. Like in the case of in Lagos specifically, the governor is the one taking the initiative. So once that bill is brought to the House, because it's a collective effort and the former governor has also thrown his weight behind it, the House of Assembly can easily repeal it. But if it does not enjoy the blessings of the governor, it does not enjoy the blessings of the political leaders, the Houses of Assembly, as they are currently constituted, may not be able to take that initiative. And that is why maybe SERAP is also seeking the other alternative of getting the Attorney General to lead that effort, either through judicial arrangement or through political engagement. But the most important or most feasible option is for citizens to rise up in their various states to push for this to happen. Because if you don't wake up and ensure that this happens in your various, and you are waiting for the federal government to take the initiative, it may take a long time to happen. But I'm happy that the precedent set by the Lagos and Zamfara state may maybe set the tone for other states to also take the initiative.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the citizens because, I mean, they are the ones meant to be in charge of government. But just to put this in context for the citizens, that is, well, this varies across states. But if you take a look at what obtains in Lagos regarding, these laws and what these ex-governors and their deputies get, you see that, for example, former governors, that's for Lagos, under the 2007 law, get 3 cars, 2 backup cars, and 1 pilot car for the ex-governor every 3 years. And former deputy governors get 2 cars, 2 backup cars, and 1 pilot car for the deputy every 3 years. Now, this is something that has been on since 2007, 13 years ago, moving into 14 years ago. But of course, Lagos is making moves to sort that. But Mr. Mutu raised an issue about the court order. Now, I believe that the Federal High Court in Lagos actually ordered that the federal government recover pensions collected by former governors now serving as ministers and members of the National Assembly. So that's the caveat. It's not just for former governors and deputy governors. They have to be the ones serving as ministers or in the National Assembly.
No. Let's put the judgment in perspective.
Okay.
The court ordered the Attorney General to take steps to challenge the legality of those laws. And it is the decision of that finding that leads to recovery of those funds that have been paid out under the pension laws of each state. So it means if the finding of the court, based on the challenge of the Attorney General, is that they were unlawful, then naturally those pension laws will be repealed automatically by the judgment of court. And then the sums that have been paid out will become recoverable.
So all the governors, the deputy governors, regardless whether they're in the House of Assembly, ministers or not?
Yes, but that is incumbent on the Attorney General taking steps to challenge the legality of those laws.
How difficult or easy has it been interfacing with the Attorney General?
And that is why you've seen the other alternative is to go from state to state, which is which over the years now. Where have we? Okay, we have 3 now. How long will it take us to have 36? And that is why that single action from the Attorney General, who has a statutory backing, will be easier.
Which is why I ask, how easy has it been interfacing with it?
Except from that response from the Attorney General, which is the formal response we are yet to have any formal compliance from the Attorney General.
So let's just imagine that, let's just imagine that you don't get a response in the coming year, coming 2 years. What option do you have?
We always have the option of going to court to start some kind of proceedings for disobedience of court order against the Attorney General. But we'd rather not take that route. Like this is not the only judgment SERAP has against the federal government that is yet to be enforced.
So is this disobedience of court order?
Yes, it's an order of court. It's a lawful order of court. It is yet to be appealed against. The Attorney General is aware of it and he has written and made a request. But what we see is that the response of the Attorney General came in March this year. So we believe that the Attorney General is working on that list because in asking for those details which we've sent to him, so what we're doing is an advocacy follow-up to ensure that action is taken on those. And I would understand that March with the COVID-19 and co. But really, we are waiting to see that the judgment is enforced.
So many questions to ask on this matter because, I mean, if we put this to popular vote, I don't even know where it's going to swing. But for now, we have to... Oh, no, sincerely, I don't even want to imagine it, sincerely. But we have to thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of our conversation this morning. Kolawole Oluwadare is Deputy Director, Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, as well as John Mutu, Public Affairs Analyst and Legislative Consultant. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's interesting that you have also had some contributions here on the program. You have anyone yet?
Oh, yes. Take a look at this one from Treesville, I believe. It says, my take on this emolument after office is that it should be totally abolished. That's where it swings for this. It says, second, the Constitution of Nigeria should be amended to that effect. Third, anyone that has served as governor should not be allowed to hold any other public office. Ooh.
Now,
Okay.
this is a judgment.
Yeah, this is a tweet, actually, on Twitter. At
Is that
Sunrise Daily
the
now.
judgment? Okay, and this one is from Ayodele Olutoye. It says, pensions should be outrightly scrapped for public office holders. It's fraudulent. I'm sure there's a PENCOM law surrounding the eligibility for pensions. Are these public office holders eligible for receiving pension after office tenures under that law?
Well,
Question.
big question. Da Vinci says all these government appointees steadily talking about revenue drive from private sector, but conveniently skip the elephant in the room. He says it's bloated civil service. How much of Nigeria's budget goes to recurrent expenditure, he asks. Well, I'll tell you. A considerable amount of it goes to recurrent expenditure.
That is not that amount. But anyway.
Which is why citizens should get involved. Take a look at that budget document. It's right there for you. So.
Absolutely. Obajaye says, we did expect less as usual, but in the meantime, we need to talk about the rate at which the government is going about borrowing to fund the budget. And besides, we really need to look inward to revitalize our assets that are moribund, which is a means of earnings. Our refineries, Ajaokuta, and of course, the rest goes on. Well, that's the much we have of you today. Thank you so much for watching Sunrise Daily today. We're back again tomorrow morning. Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.
And I'm Kayode Okikelu. Thank you for joining us.